If the fragments of silicon are insufficiently fragmented, please contact the silicon. All right.
All right. All right. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Right. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me this time is a tag team partner, Golix. You might notice that there's a lack of a personage this week. And that is because Petty Fan is off on assignment. That assignment being he is, well, I think he's just gotten surgery. Um, he's talked about it fairly extensively in the weeks leading up to it, but suffice to say, he's not in a condition to, you know, handle the tech stuff, which is being handled by Golix this week, who is having a bit of a go with it.
Yeah,
Let's
well, it was
say.
working fine when we tested it, but I didn't try certain things regarding window capture.
Well, the important thing is everything is working, and we are broadcasting, and we are recording. So this will be caught for the ages. It's anyway. I suppose we should get to the news. Yeah, it's going to be fairly shorter this week due to obvious reasons. And with that in mind, Golix, you go first.
I mean, it's really hot right now, which is also not helping my level of stress, honestly. But we have not really a super lot going on this week. I tried today and have to try again tomorrow to get in contact with the car place to see if they can try to get that exhaust issue that they said was going to need to be solved before it would be able to pass inspection done before I need to have it inspected. And also, um, if we can double check why the price was as high as they said it was, because my everyone else I know has said that that was higher than they paid, but I think all of them have cars that don't have dual exhausts, so that might be it. Video game wise, gotten back a bit into Splatoon 3 and also been breeding some of the new guys that were not available before in Pokemon Scarlet, but still probably spending most of my video game time with Tears of the Kingdom. I'm getting near the end. I'm done with the four main things, but this is obviously a game that can be drawn out significantly. I think that's all I've got.
Hmm. Um, right, as mentioned, Petty is dealing with his medical issues, so it
Mm-hmm.
falls to me. And yeah, not a lot going on this week, honestly. Let's see.
We
Picked
wish him
out,
well.
yes, um, and a speedy recovery so that he can so that we can return to normal if nothing else.
Yeah.
Like,
Sorry, I'm really not good at this.
no. Well, I mean, there are several reasons why he usually handles this, um, but that's out of our collective hands. Like, anyway, um, yeah. As far as news goes, let's see. Yeah, just not a lot this week. Um, Picked out a restaurant for my forthcoming birthday next month. So there's that, I guess.
Oh
And
man, your parents give you a whole restaurant for your birthday? I'm kidding.
anyway, see, in terms of games, kind of been bouncing from a few games here and there. Played through Gree. I'll be honest, I wasn't as high on it as the reviews were. It's like the actual game part of the game I didn't enjoy all that much. Like honestly, I much preferred Ape Out. Like, but I have since started up Grandia 2. Like, it's been a long time
That's a
since I played that
classic.
one. Yes, it is. Though I'm trying to figure out if there's something wrong because I don't know, or if like the game is just like tied to 30 frames per second or something because the battles feel slow. Like,
I mean, that might be the case.
it wouldn't be surprising if it was. Like, um, but anyway, so I think that's enough for this news segment for the week. So, merrily, we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast, and we are welcoming to the show Matt Reithel and John Mikula of Graphite Lab.
How's it going, guys?
It goes well. How are
Yeah,
you two
not too
doing
bad
today?
for all my complaining.
Fair enough.
I'm good at
Right.
complaining.
He
I'm right there with
is.
you.
Right. So how we like to get started is we like to get to know the people behind the games, the studios, and whatnot. Um, and Matt, I know you've been on our program before, but that was I think about 10 years ago.
It was a
So
long time. Yeah, I we were promoting a game called Hive Jump,
yeah.
which was headed to the Wii U, and
hmm
yeah, we it was quite a while for sure.
So it would probably be best to get people reacquainted with you and your company, given the length of time that has transpired. And John, you are new, so we legitimately have to get to know you. Like, so we start out by asking this particular question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Uh, for me, I guess here, what got me into video games? Well, I mean, probably usual stuff, right? Like I've been a lifelong game player, right? Like
I
I,
mean,
I
the
grew up.
usual stuff has varied a lot among people we've interviewed, if only because of relative time periods.
Oh, really? I guess that's true. Well, I guess here I was born in '93, so my first console was a PlayStation One. This kind of got how that was kind of my introduction, I guess, into the world of video games, and kind of just kind of stuck with it ever since, I guess. I grew up playing like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro and Oddworld and kind of things like that. I had a big World of Warcraft phase in the middle there, and when it kind of got time for me to think about what I wanted to do for a living, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I think about video games a lot. It's not just that I play them, but that they permeate me, right? Like they permeate my thoughts, and it's just a thing I just kind of keep spiraling into, even as I get older. So I went to a school. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and in Chicago there was a school called I think it's called something different now, but at the time it was called Tribeca Flashpoint Media Arts Academy. And there they have, well, their whole thing was like the media arts, right? So their whole thing was you can pick, your media and then go down kind of a focus track with that. So you could get into filmmaking there, you could get into recording, you could get into like 3D animation, and then they had like a whole games course there. So, I went there. I went, took their games course. Learned a lot about game design and programming there, and after I graduated, I kind of sent my resume, all over, right? Like, places in the city, all over the United States. Just kind of anyone who was looking for, junior programmer or, just whoever could, or any place I thought I had a shot at, right? And kind of in that, brought me to Graphite Lab, which is Matt's company, and from there, sent my resume, and they liked it and got hired, and I've been there ever since. And I've been working there, largely, I'm a senior programmer, but at the time I was just a gameplay programmer. But over the course of 10 years, I've been working at Graphite Lab. Have become a senior programmer, and then with some of our later titles and with this title we're talking about today, Mr. Run and Jump, I've been a game director, so kind of taking a lead design position on this game.
Okay.
So there you go, kind of a long-winded answer, I guess, but that's kind of my broad history, I guess, and of how I got into games.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Right. So before we get into Mr. Jump and Run, I do want to talk about a couple of other projects, because this isn't your first rodeo with Atari, so to speak, as I understand it. In
This
fact,
one's we've actually been working with Atari for a little while.
yeah.
We did some mobile production for them, and then through that developed an original IP last April. So that was our first original collaboration with Atari, and then Mr. Run and Jump is just the next in that evolution and continued partnership with Atari.
Right. And so I suppose my first question here is, how did you first cross paths with Atari?
How did we first cross paths with Atari?
Yeah, how did you first started working with them on what Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
the story game, which ended up getting renamed Puzzle. So I've been working in games about 20 years, and I met a producer named James Daly at a company called 2K, and he and I were working on. I was a contract developer, and he was a producer, and he and I worked really well together and made a couple of games through his role at 2K. And then he left 2K and started working at Atari. And so when people shift in the industry like that, it's not uncommon for them to find partners that they've worked with before and say, hey, I'm at Atari now. We've got this property. We think it might be a good fit for you and your team. Do you want to take a look at it? And with the topic of something like Roller Coaster Tycoon, we were in kind of a really unique spot in that we were developing a puzzle game already, and we were kind of looking at ways to connect that puzzle game with a license, and so that's kind of how the Atari relationship built. But when you take the whole story, it was even before Atari, and it's always just a connection with the people versus really the company, you know?
Yeah, yeah. We've experienced that kind of connection ourselves. Like we've known people who worked at company X and then they go move to company Y, and we talk to them there. Like, so
For sure.
it's certainly understandable. Uh, and what was it like working on a franchise as venerated as like Roller Coaster Tycoon?
I mean, that one you got to be very careful. Uh, Roller Coaster Tycoon is one of my probably top 5 games. The original on the PC, I loved it. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on it. And so when you've got a legacy franchise like that, um, you got to be very delicate in how you treat it. What we set out to do was to try and bring a different audience into Roller Coaster Tycoon. We weren't trying to make a roller coaster classic game, with that particular endeavor. But we were trying to kind of bring a mobile player that, maybe was looking for a more casual experience, and how could they enjoy that through like a theme park lens. And so, yeah, it was super fun to work on, the roller coaster franchise, and we're doing more simulation type stuff with them now. But when we made that very first mobile game, we are kind of just cutting our teeth working with Atari for the first time, understanding how the franchise worked and operated. And so it was a bit of a dipping our toe into the waters experience. But yeah, from our point of view, it came with a lot of respect for the franchise and just trying to see, what we could kind of add to it.
Yeah, and that's good because, well, in all honesty, I can't say that every roller coaster tycoon entry has been treated with reverence. Um,
Yeah, and we'll be the first to admit that ours, a lot of people, it wasn't for that core audience, and sometimes the messaging gets a little confused. We didn't advertise that game to lovers of the original, Roller Coaster Tycoon One necessarily. We kind of put it over in a different spot, and and
right.
yeah, so it's always kind of careful consideration, but not all games are for all people, and so many people love roller coaster that we knew that a puzzle game would be a little bit different for the franchise, and that some people it might not be for them.
It's certainly understandable. Plus, this is also a mobile title only, which I think is alienating in its own way, given the PC roots of the roller coaster tycoon trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, being a mobile title, I think there's players that want to just have that classic game. But when I look at Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic, to me it's a perfect game. Chris Sawyer did an amazing job with it, built an entire franchise from it. So it was never my intention to try and replace Classic, because it's already great. So we were just really trying to kind of widen the audience by introducing it to a different type of player.
Once again, that makes sense. Uh, do you know how successful your endeavor was?
I mean, that was a game we worked on quite a while ago. In terms
Uh,
of success, we got, lots of respect from Apple, and we had tons of players playing the game. So in my eyes, it was successful. The players that we wanted to enjoy the game loved it.
okay. Um, I don't want to dwell too much on this, considering we do have other games to actually talk about. And speaking of which, uh, this did lead to your next game and your first original collaboration with Atari. And indeed, this game made headlines for being like the first original game Atari has published in a lot of years. In I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Combined era. Combinria.
Yeah. It's pronounced combinera. It's a
Ah,
Swedish word for combine. Um, and believe it or not, we wrestled over the name quite a bit. But there was kind of a mystique to it, and two developers, Jacob Lear and Phil Snowbarger, who worked with Graphite Lab. Um, Ultimately, it was their initial vision and to make that game, and when we asked around about the name and that sort of thing, this was a name that kind of spoke to them, so we went with it. But it does make it a little bit harder to pronounce, and in all parts of making a game, you got to think about how it's going to be shared. And luckily, we don't have a similar problem with Mr. Run and Jump. It's there, it's easy. It literally is the mechanics in the game, and so whereas Combinera is a little bit more mystique in its naming, Mr. Run and Jump is very forthcoming and tells you exactly what you're going to get.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Mr. Run and Jump is very much. It is what it says it is. Its name on the tin, or however you want to put that. Like, um, also very British. Um, for that's what they call platformers in like the UK and such. Jump and runs.
I see. There you go.
Yeah. Um, anyway, so I suppose moving to Mr. Jump and Run, what was the original conceit for creating this game?
Well, that's definitely a story that John's going to have to tell. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and turn it over to Mr. Run and Jump himself.
Yeah. Yeah, so Mr. Run and Jump, it started, it was a side project I was doing, uh, and I was making a homebrew Atari 2600 game. Um, and, you know, the story behind that, I guess, is that I was, maybe around like 2015 or 2016 or something, quite a few years ago, I was I was playing a lot of like old NES games, right? Like I was playing, we were talking about how old I am, in my mind, growing up, it was like old NES carts, your Mario Brothers, your Castlevanias, all that. Those were the classics, right? Air quotes, the classics. Um,
Right.
and those games are still classic, right? I'm just saying, like, it's going to depend on like who you ask, right? Like, what are the classics of gaming? But to me, I was just collecting a whole bunch of NES carts, and I was playing a lot of NES games and trying to finish things, and I, just as kind of, I had been working for Graphite for a couple years at that point, and so I was making games, and I'm like, I think whenever you kind of steep yourself in a lot of a certain type of media, you just kind of naturally start thinking about, how that media works. And I was just kind of coming up, with a bunch of, NES games that I thought like, oh, I wonder if this could work, or, if I was working on an NES, here's the game I would make, that kind of thing. And so eventually I kind of stumbled upon like the homebrew community, which there's people out there, there's whole communities, people like putting together, oh, here's how you make an NES game, here's how you make an SNES game, here's compiling resources and old manuals and tutorials and things like that. And so, like I said, I'm a programmer by trade. So when I'm looking at, oh, here's how you write assembly code for these old consoles or whatever, I'm like, okay, like I know enough. I'm kind of getting this. So it was, I guess, making a homebrew title was becoming more and more of a reality. I'm like, I think I can pull this off. But then as I was digging into it, I'm like, well, I saw people talking about it, and the Atari 2600 making a game for that is almost kind of like this legendary programming challenge, where it's like okay, yeah, like making an NES game or whatever, that's hard, but what's really hard is making a 2600 game. So being kind of quite a bit younger and quite a bit dumber, I'm like, ooh, like this sounds like it could be a kind of a fun challenge. So my plan was I would kind of whip up a Atari game kind of in like a couple months or whatever. I'd be like, okay, let me get something simple and quick on the 2600 just to kind of say that I've done it, Uh, and then I'll move on to the NES, and then maybe after that, I'll get on to the SNES, and I'll get to the PlayStation, and I had this whole journey laid out in my head of like, oh, I could like make these homebrew games through the ages, and um, and then so kind of what turned out to be a couple like what was supposed to be a couple months or whatever turned out to be several years of on and off development. It turns out the forums weren't lying. Making a game for the 2600 is quite difficult. But it just kind of turned into one of those projects where it's like, okay, I'd work on it for, a couple months and then not work on it for, the rest of the year, right? Like, so it wasn't until I think until we were working on Combinera at Graphite, that run and jump was kind of in a spot that I'm like, this is good. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to try to bundle it up with an emulator and just, put it out for sale on Steam or something. And, at that time, looking at Combinera and seeing its art style, it has a very similar kind of post-processing heavy kind of neon glow look. I would look at that game and I'm like, man, that is such a sharp looking game. I wonder if we could take this art style that we were getting pretty good with as a studio. We could take this and maybe apply it to the thing I've been working on. I guess the fact that we were working for Atari is purely like a magical coincidence. Like it was truly like the planets aligned. We were working for actual Atari, and I was making this homebrew Atari game. And then, we were working on Combinera, and I'm like, very much just like, connecting the dots in my mind of like, okay, we got, run and jump, mix it with a little Combinera, bring it into the modern era, and we have these contacts at Atari, maybe we can make something happen. So, another, I guess, long-winded way of, answering your question, I guess. But once I kind of had that central pitch, I remember, sending Matt a big long Slack message over, I think it was like a Christmas break or something. And I'm like, hey, what do you think? Do you think they'll go for it? And then Matt, you said something along the lines of, oh, John, you're a genius. What will we do without you? But
Yeah, here's a whole bunch of money for your beautiful idea. As I'm sure there was some of that involved.
yeah, right.
But yeah, like we have an interesting kind of working process at Graphite, and like if somebody's, I wanted it to be kind of John, because he'd been working on this game for years. Like I didn't want to be like, hey, that thing you made, it's cool. Like let's do it here. So I was just kind of waiting. I think we're all just kind of waiting for right place, right time, and I'm super thrilled that we've reached it. So yeah, it's exciting.
And how long has the let's call it the neon version been in development for?
It's been about a year, or I think at this point a little longer than a year.
Yeah, we ran about 10 months of solid development, and then we've been kind of in a little bit of like kind of a testing phase, really. I mean, we do full testing on the product, but we just finished a demo as part of Steam Next Fest, and found there was a few things, little tips that the fans gave us that we were reacting to and making changes on. So there's a lot of like that little those little smaller changes that we get at the very end that kind of contribute to that 12 and 13th month, 14th month, that sort of thing.
Right.
But, we're in the finishing touches stage right now.
Yeah. And how much of a departure, let's say, is the neon version from the Atari 2600 version?
Well, I guess fairly big departure, just the nature of those two games, right? Like modern computers, orders of magnitude more advanced than the 2600 was, but we tried to keep the spirit of the 2600 version. We tried to persist that throughout the neon version, right? So a lot of that was looking at like what I was able to do on that old hardware, and then think of like, what does this mean in a modern sense. So in the classic game, it's fairly simple, it's fairly straightforward. You run, you jump, there's a series of enemies, and it's one hit kills, and then you you restart and go back to the beginning of the world and try again until you get through the whole thing.
Mhm.
So carrying kind of those mechanics forward, it fit it really nicely in line with other uh, precision platformers, kind of like a Super Meat Boy or a Celeste was kind of our big touchstone. Um, so we look at games like that and take our inspiration there, but we also try to keep the classic feel, I guess, or kind of that classic flavor, and kind of not just rip off Celeste or whatever wholesale, but uh, definitely use those as kind of like, okay, here's kind of like the closest modern parallel to what Mr. Run and Jump Classic was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Though when I look at this game, I don't think of Celeste or Super Meat Boy. I think, well, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this game series, but Flatland.
Well, if it wasn't, it is very Flatland, but if it wasn't Neon,
Yeah.
it could reasonably pass as some kind of Celeste Meat Boy hybrid.
Hmm.
Yeah, one
Yeah.
of the
That said, I
recommend
did like the transition at the very beginning from hey, this is like an old Atari game to oh, the screen literally broke and now we're in Neon Land.
Well, and one thing we realized with Hive Jump is like the games that inspired us. Sometimes people would play them and be like, "Oh no, this isn't like Contra. This is like Turrican. Have you ever played Turrican?" And I'm like, "I have never touched Turrican, but somehow we made a game that had similar, feel and vibe." So it's always fun to hear what our fans and players what games they draw connection to because for us we see little glimmers of certain games, but for our fans they might see something different and it's always just kind of a fun experiment and a fun discovery to see kind of what lights we've turned on in our players' minds for games that they've played or games that they loved growing up and that sort of thing.
Hmm. Certainly. Certainly. And in terms of the Atari 2600 version, what was the hardest thing to get working there?
Oh man, it's the hardest thing is probably the score display. Not even necessarily, keeping a score like in memory or something like that, but just like displaying five numbers in a row like that is probably the hardest part. Um, because how that console like outputs to a TV is it's so unlike anything we do in kind of modern game development. It's literally like sending uh, like commands, telling the cathode ray tube, which is like this laser pointer inside of old TVs,
Right.
literally like sending color commands to that thing while it's on the move. Uh, so it's like you have to. It's extremely complicated, right? But I guess to sum it up, kind of somewhat succinctly, I'll do the best I can. But it's like, while this thing is moving, the laser scans from the top left of your screen. It draws a scan line, goes to the right, and then drops down one, and then goes back over. So it's like a typewriter, right? Like a laser typewriter drawing one line of your screen at a time. Um, and and so it's like, okay, if you want to draw like the character or something, like you have to wait, you program in kind of a little timer to wait for the cathode ray tube, while it's on the move, factoring in the time that like programming instructions take time to execute. You're programming in these timers so that when like right before the cathode ray tube's going to draw a scan line with the player on it, you tell it like, hey, the player's going to be white and it's going to be this color or this shape, right? Like uh, and you do that for the whole length of however many scan lines the player takes up. But
The way that actual displays work has not actually changed that much from this. It's just now a lot more of it is handled by the default by the hardware.
right,
Like your TV knows how to do this. so that the game doesn't have to tell it.
Yeah, in terms of actually like how we tell the game to render, yeah, like this on the 2600 is a lot more like direct control, as
Yeah,
opposed to now like you are interfacing with like your graphics card driver, and you're like submitting like big buffers of memory, and you're dealing with like an OpenGL type interface and
yeah.
things like that.
The monitor still draws everything one line at a time, but
Right.
like the monitor knows how to do that. You don't need to literally machine language command it.
Yeah, exactly. But so yeah, so it's all these things to draw like one character, and so when you have a score, which is the five numbers or whatever, like all like so close together, like um, the timing on that is so precise, and you have to be so incredibly efficient with your assembly code that like it was it, I don't know. It's unlike anything, like I say, that you do in modern game development. Like it's a really interesting challenge.
So, if you were to do it again, what would you do differently?
I think if I were to do it again, I would. I think I would make. So instead of writing assembly code, I would make some kind of loose compiler, some kind of like high level language that I could like jury rig together, and then so that way I'm not forced to do assembly code. That would be my thought. I think it would speed up the process. It would make the code a lot more readable, a lot more debuggable. Um, doing so just comes at the cost of like efficiencies, right? Because when you're doing like raw assembly, you can like hyper optimize like all your commands for like very specific situations. But when you write in like a high level language and you rely on like a compiler to turn that high level language into assembly code, it's doing like big generalities.
This is a lot of why the
To
file sizes for games are so huge now compared to how they used to be. Because all of them are done in a much higher level code.
uh, Potentially to some degree,
I mean, it's
code
not
never
the
takes
only
up.
reason, but it's part of it.
Right. I think like the audio and textures are going to take up a lot more of that disk size than the code ever does. But
That's because a lot of the AAA stuff. I mean, you do any compression these days.
Yeah, but even if you like do a game with retro-ish graphics, the file size is going to be a lot bigger because it has like an entire game engine packed in there instead of being. It
Right.
could
Yeah, I
be a
mean,
lot
there's
of different things instead of being specifically built to be the one thing.
sure. I mean, there's something to it, but there's also, like John was saying with the textures, we were working on the PS2, like our common texture sizes were like 32 by 32, 64 by 64, commonly atlased. Whereas now, like, we can get away with like 1024s and be a little bit more um just be a little bit more loose with it, work a little bit faster, just because we don't have to be concerned about putting it to like a disc or a cartridge all the time anymore. Our GBA carts, when I first got started, we're working with 4 megabyte carts. So, we're very forced into, kind of always trying to think about the cart or whatever else. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's also just a lot more assets that we try to cram into our content now, even because of the 2D tools that we use to make art or the 3D tools used to make art. We can make this stuff a lot faster with the tools that we've got now. So I think just across the board, all the different tools that we use, including the engines, there's just more going on. And goodness, I mean, most of what we do now is digital as well, so we're not always tied to that physical medium, which takes off a lot of the burden, as another consideration.
Right. Though I suppose on that note, the Atari 2600 version of Mr. Jump and Run, sorry, Mr. Run and Jump, uh, did make headlines for because apparently Atari is going to be publishing this on actual physical cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, were you expecting that? Was that something that Atari decided later on?
You know, it's like a separate program. Program's not the right word. It is a separate initiative within Atari, this XP process. So in terms of like, kind of when that happened, I wouldn't speak too much to that just because I'm not sure kind of what they have in mind on how they want to do that product. But it was kind of considered two separate conversations and two separate processes. Yeah, it kind of came together in a little bit different way than the modern version that we've been kind of discussing prior.
We figured, I guess, when we pitched the modern version that they would do something with, the
Yeah.
classic version. We didn't quite know what they were planning to do. So when they came back to us and they're like, oh, we got this XP program, we want to do physical cartridges, I'm like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But
For sure.
at the time when we pitched it, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess we were thinking like, they might, they might do like, here's like a, bundle it with an emulator and put it out on the platforms or something, something like that. And that stuff might still happen. We don't know necessarily what Atari's planning to do with all their stuff, but. But yeah, no. At the time, we didn't know that a cartridge version was going to come, and it was a really nice surprise when it did come.
And when you did find out, have you been involved in like any aspect of the packaging, or like, is this going to come with instruction, lavish instructions or anything like that, or is that all in like the hands of Atari?
I did write a manual for them, and we've had a couple meetings where they've shown us like mock-ups, like digital mock-ups at least, or they're they have a whole kind of pipeline where they're like, oh, we're thinking this box design, and I had the cover art for that game. I had that commissioned from years ago when I was going to release the game myself, so I gave that to them. Uh, so yeah, it's mostly been them, but we've given them stuff, a fair few assets ourselves. Yeah.
Okay. And shifting back to, I suppose, the overall package, not just what is the story of Mr. Run and Jump? Why is he running and jumping everywhere?
Mr. Run and Jump, he's an abstract character. He lives in kind of this land just called the Realms of Color. He has a dog named Leap, and in the classic game, Leap is wandering, through the realms of color towards the dark realm, which is the realm where light doesn't exist, and if he goes too far into the dark realm, he'll never be able to find his way back. So Leap is kind of running along as he does, and you as Mr. Run and Jump are trying to catch up to him and stop him before he goes too far. And then the new version, the neon version, is something of a pseudo sequel to that classic version, where someone pointed it out, but yeah, the new version starts with a kind of a recreation of the classic version, that as you're going along in it, there is a kind of glitchy kind of transformation event that turns the classic game into the the fancy new neon version of the Realms of Color. And in that kind of transformation event, there's a entity called the Void was born, which is just kind of this black hole antagonist character who is growing and consuming everything in its wake. So Mr. Run and Jump and Leap are going through the realms of color to collect these gems of power that they use to put a stop to the void once and for all.
And what is the current state of the neon version?
We're through development. We're going to be launching in just a couple of weeks. The modern version, as we're named, I guess we refer to the old one as Mr. Run and Jump 2600. So Mr. Run and Jump comes out July 25th worldwide on all platforms. So the game's complete and ready, and we're excited to have it come out. As far as the 2600 version, those pre-orders start the end of this month.
And how much are both versions of Mr. Run and Jump going to retail for?
Mr. Run and Jump retails for $24.99, and the special edition Atari XP cartridge for Mr. Run and Jump, I will have to double check that price. I know that's something that Atari's been managing more on their end. So I'll just direct you to the XP website because I'm not sure about shipping and kind of regional availability. So if you go to Atari.com and look up their XP program, you're going to find the most current information.
Okay. Right. So I think I've run through my gamut of questions. Galix, what about you?
I think I've commented. I'm noticing that the visuals are very high contrast, and I was wondering if you had done any consulting about like making sure there wouldn't be any seizures or anything.
So that's always a consideration of ours. So we have a few settings within the game that account for different resolutions and other things like that, but also can adjust like the bloom intensity. So there are some visual control settings within the game that'll allow users to adapt it for their best experience.
Okay, I
As
was
far as outside consulting, we frequently collaborate with groups like Able Gamers and others, but nobody was consulted specifically for that item that you just brought up.
okay. No,
We took
I was just wondering because even just looking at this footage, some of the really bright spots make my eyes hurt a little, and my eyes aren't actually like particularly bad or
sure,
anything. So
sure, totally understandable. And that was actually some feedback we got throughout development that we tweaked and tuned. But even with our recent demo through Steam, some players requesting some adjustments to things like the bloom sliders, which are adjustments that we've made and allowed for some kind of player specific tuning for their best experience.
that's good to hear.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. So I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about Mr. Run and Jump. And looking forward to seeing it released.
Yeah,
So
thanks, guys. Thanks for having us on, and thanks for the support.
no
Yeah,
problem,
thank you
no
very
problem.
much.
Right. So the game is Mr. Run and Jump. Mr. Run and Jump Neon New, or whatever you want to call it. The modern version will be released on, pretty much every platform, including the Atari VCS. Atari's like own modern platform for a price of $24.99. And Mr. Run and Jump 2600, the limited edition, will be available for pre-order for $59.99, which you can pay for 4 interest-free installments of $14.99 with shop pay apparently. But you can do that at the Atari stores. Um, so yeah, be sure to you know pre-order the version you wish to have today. And Alex, if you can, play us to the next segment.
There we go.
Uh,
That should have worked.
no. Well, regardless, welcome to the topic of discussion for the week. Um, Up this time, we are going to be talking about the Pikmin franchise. Um, Pretty sure we've talked about Pikmin before, but it seems like a good time to revisit Pikmin because you know, Pikmin 4 is very rapidly approaching. Um, I think this is Nintendo's most inexplicable long-running franchise, um, or at least living franchise, because I don't know, Pikmin just never was really pegged as a game that would be running to 2 installments, much less 4, if you know what I mean. Or
Yeah.
rather, like, though I think that might come down to the fact that this is one of Miyamoto's personal inventions. Like,
It does also fill a different, design space than all of the other ones.
true, but it's like um, that is sometimes not a reason. The franchises have not come back. Like, when was the last time we got an F-Zero game, for example?
Fair enough.
Um, and it's also like Pikmin sales have never been amazing. Um, Granted, a lot of that probably has to do with the fact that like the mainline Pikmin games, or at least the original version of those, have been on like Nintendo's literally the worst performing platforms prior to Pikmin 4 hitting the Switch. Because Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2, they are GameCube cult classics. It's just the GameCube is the second worst selling console in Nintendo's history. The first being the Wii U, which was the principal platform for Pikmin 3.
Hmm.
So, that you take a strange series that has niche appeal and you put it on poor performing platforms, you can't be too surprised if the sales don't. What I'm saying. But the Pikmin games have come to more popular platforms, like and indeed, and I don't think anyone was expecting this. The entire mainline Pikmin franchise is now playable on the Nintendo Switch.
Is the whole thing? I had thought I'd heard
Um,
that there was one that still wasn't, but I.
there, there is one. There is the 2D platformer release for the 3DS, Hey You Pikmin, that is still stuck on the 3DS, but that is a spin-off title and not particularly beloved either. Like, um, so
Okay, yeah, yes.
you know,
I was thinking of one of the
well,
other ones, I think.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was thinking of Luigi's Mansion.
yeah. Well, Luigi's Mansion, as soon as Dark Moon comes over, the entire that franchise will be playable on the Nintendo Switch. Like,
I think so, something like that. Anyway, that's not the one we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Those are
Um,
just two things that in the same direct got. Oh, also most of the other ones are going to be there.
yeah. Um, but yeah. You can play the entire Pikmin saga. Um, that is important on the Nintendo Switch. You know, because Pikmin 1 and 2 are, I believe we mentioned this during the Nintendo Direct recap. They are now available for the Nintendo Switch digitally, and in September they will be releasing that in physical form.
Hmm.
You
Which is
know,
good because you may not have had the opportunity to play the other ones on the things that they were released for initially.
and I'm guessing the port was handled by Nintendo internally, because like I haven't heard any word of like, oh, this was handled by Iron Galaxy or whatever. Um, which is, in fairness, how they've handled it in the past, because like the new play control versions of Pikmin 1 and 2 were also handled internally at Nintendo. Like,
Right.
uh, now, Galax, have you ever played a Pikmin title uh, in the past?
Only a little bit. I've always been a little bit afraid of both RTSs and games with relatively strict time management constraints.
Hmm.
Because those are things that give me a hard time. So it did not appeal to me that much, even though I think the idea is really cool.
Yeah.
But I did play
In
them a little
fairness,
bit.
yeah. In fairness, what you're describing as Pikmin 1, that's the only one that has a, quote unquote strict time limit,
Yeah,
but
two
is
has a
on.
time limit, sort of, but also afterwards you can keep going, and the new biggest part of the gameplay doesn't count towards your time limit.
Yeah, Pikmin 2. Pikmin 2 has a timer, but there's no limit to it.
Right.
Pikmin
It's
3
just
does.
you need to make sure you're good. And like I said, the caves. Well, there's still the
Yeah,
daily timers, but that's not as big of a deal.
yeah. Like Pikmin 2 kind of went in the opposite direction of Pikmin 1,
This has
and
resulted in many people arguing with various amounts of seriousness over whether the improvements in gameplay are overweighed by the kind of change in focus regarding which of these two games is better.
I mean, I have played and beaten Pikmin 1 and 2, um, and I can definitely see where people are coming from. Like Pikmin 1 is a much tighter experience.
Yeah, it
It's
is ultimately like a survival game.
mhm.
You're not gonna run out of like you don't have to manage like resource meters or whatever, but you do need to get the parts of your ship back before you run out of breathable air because there's something in the air on Hokotate that is not on Earth or whatever they want to call. I forget what they call the planet.
The planet goes unnamed. Uh, they leave it up to implication, like it's um, very heavily implied that the planet that Olimar crash lands is Earth.
If it's not
That
Earth, it's
when
some other planet that has a lot of Earth brands of stuff on it.
like sure. Um, that
Okay,
was a
yeah,
bit
they call it
unusual.
They call it PNF 404 apparently.
Yeah.
Although that might not be until Pikmin 3.
I think that might be the case because, like I said, the name does not, like the planet goes unnamed.
Yeah, it's just the planet what's got. Well, the first time they land there, they crash there and they didn't even know the planet was there. And then the second time it's like, there was stuff there. Go back there and make enough money that we can keep having our company go.
More, it was kind of a happy accident because, like, the debt rocket thing kind of sucks up like one of the treasures and states, "Oh, hey, this is worth a lot of picos."
Yeah, which is apparently the thing they use for money.
Mm-hmm. Um, but yeah, in terms of pacing, Pikmin 2 is a lot. There's a lot more of it, which definitely did irritate the Pikmin 1 fans. I can definitely see why. Because um, Pikmin 2 is huge. Like,
Yeah,
I
the
don't.
surface area of the game is already a bit bigger, and then they added the cave
Yeah,
things.
it's really the dungeon exploring that bloats everything because there's no timer in there, and um, each floor, like to put it this way, you can save after each floor is done. Not like like 5 floors or whatever. Um,
Now, is that a
but
scummable save or is that a true save? Or sorry, is that a scummable save or is that a suspend?
um, I think a bit of both. Like it's not a. It's been a long time since I played it, so I don't remember exactly. But I do remember if I didn't like how a floor run went, I would reset the game.
Okay,
So
so it's at least somewhat scummable.
yes,
I mean,
um,
by which I mean you're able to restart from it. It's not just a suspend that you could put the game
yeah,
down and pick it up where you left off, but you can't go back to that.
yeah. The other gimmick with the dungeons is this was the only place you could find the special breeds of Pikmin.
The
Uh,
the overpowered ones and then the other overpowered ones.
yeah, the purple and the white.
Yeah, the purple ones, which are slow, but they're even more ridiculously strong independently, which is usually made that more than worth it. And then the white ones are not actually particularly outstanding, except that if you're willing to sacrifice them, they'll kill things that eat them, and they're immune to poison.
Yeah, the white
But
ones were
each Pikmin after the first game, every kind of Pikmin has basically had something that they're immune to. In the
yeah
first game, yellow Pikmin weren't actually immune to anything. They were they were able to carry bomb rocks, but I think when they exploded, they could still die.
yes, that is true. It's the second game where they realized that, oh hey, that actually kind of made that still that made the yellow Pikmin a bit useless.
Yeah,
I
it
think in
was
the
just
first game,
that, and they can also be thrown higher because they have big ears that, I guess, catch some of the air,
yeah, I think they were also faster,
but not
but
significantly. Compared to the
yeah,
red Pikmin doing like almost double damage, I think, and the blue Pikmin not dying in water, which is all over the place.
yeah. Um, so they tweaked it so the yellow Pikmin are immune to electricity,
And also, suddenly,
and
there's electricity.
yeah. Also, here is a pro tip: bring 100 yellow Pikmin to the final dungeon, and you will just um, curb stomp the final boss because it turns out most of his attacks are electricity based.
But yeah,
Yeah,
and I think in 2 they made every Pikmin able to carry bomb rocks because that's not
they
really.
did. Yeah. Pikmin 3, I am not familiar with, unfortunately, because, well, once again, it was a Wii U title. And yeah, it's been re released on the Switch. I don't have a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah,
Um,
it had the crewmates in Pikmin 3 are from a different planet, and I believe they're going there mostly for resource gathering.
yeah, they're trying to gather juice from what I remember.
Yeah, they're trying to avoid a planet wide food shortage. and
Mm.
they've pretty much replaced the purple and the white Pikmin in most modes with the rock Pikmin, who are basically purple ones, only slightly less overpowered, and flying ones which fly.
Right. I think you can still get the purple and the white in like
I
the
yeah, they
block
still they
mode.
still appear in like the dungeon mode or something, but
Yeah.
they're basically not in most of the main game.
And I suppose that gets us to Pikmin 4. Um, Now, the big innovation with Pikmin 4 is nighttime missions, which
Yeah,
is,
previously the word on nighttime has been on the during the nighttime on this planet, all of the monsters that are kind of already dangerous during the day just completely flip out and murder everything. So get your ass back in your spaceship, and anything left on the planet is gonna die.
never talk like that again.
I really tried to minimize it.
Yeah. Um, yes. And new Pikmin in this will be the Ice Pikmin, which try to guess what they do or are made of.
Yeah, they freeze stuff.
Yeah. And, you they will freeze enemies and bodies of water.
Yes,
Um,
which is actually kind of a big deal. A lot of the stuff that they showed off initially in the first trailer for 4, or first couple trailers for 4, is hey, water might not be quite as terrifying here because you have a dog that can swim and you have Pikmin that can freeze the surface and have things walk over it afterwards.
yes. And the second new type of Pikmin, because apparently this is the series tradition. We've got to, every new Pikmin title, we've got to introduce two new Pikmin. Um, the Glow Pikmin, um, which are going to be very invaluable at night because, they're going to allow you to see and not get eaten. At least
Yeah.
I presume. Um,
Yeah, sorry, I downloaded the Pikmin 4 demo, but I still have not had a chance to play it.
Duly noted. But
They are the only Pikmin that you can use at night, apparently.
yeah,
Which and then they can use their glow to stun the berserk enemies.
yeah, because um, you are looking for a resource card called Sparklium.
They sure do
And yeah,
love naming things.
yes, they do. The Piclopedia better come back.
Oh, I'm sure it will. The real question is we'll get something like Louis' notes on how friggin' everything tastes.
Hmm. And be able to toss carrot at all the animals.
Also, apparently, there's something on this planet that is, but like, yeah, you are on like a bus to the planet, and you have to rescue all the other people who are on the bus
Yeah,
rocket.
including Captain Olimar. You know, because we got to shoehorn him into this.
Well, I mean, he is sort of the face of the franchise. It was a little bit weird that he wasn't in 3, or at least not significantly.
Yeah. Also worth noting, apparently Pikmin 4 is running on Unreal.
Which is an interesting choice.
Yes. Not the first Nintendo title, a Nintendo published title to use Unreal Engine. If I had to wager a guess, it's Unreal Engine 4.
Mm-hmm.
But Yoshi's Crafted World was done by Goodfeel. This is a Nintendo EPD title, so it's as internally developed as you get. Like, uh, not exactly sure if it's going to use the Joy Cons like previous Pikmin titles used the Wii remote.
It
The
seems like
pointer.
the aiming is pretty much done dual analogs, and
Right,
there's a lot
which,
more auto aim.
well, yeah, if they're using the dual analogs, that's the thing. Using the pointer controls was actually much more accurate. You know, usually hailed as the definitive way to play a Pikmin title.
Yeah,
So,
I listened to Arlo's discussion of it, and he seemed to find it relatively uh, easy to manage at least. But yeah, it is a significant difference.
hmm,
That it's more most of the time it's keyed on where your character's facing unless you adjust it.
yeah. Um. Anyway, we should probably wrap this up.
All right,
Like,
sorry, I didn't have the most stuff to talk about on this one.
it's fine. We're operating at 2/3 capacity, let's say.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments Silicon. Coming up on the week ahead, um, no Friday show for obvious reasons. Um, and coming up on the Sunday reviews, potentially, this is a bit on the bubble, mainly due to Petty's recovery time.
Yeah, because even if I was able to get it to run game things, I don't have all the games that he has.
Yeah, it's like I usually send him to Petty because he usually um, helms the footage. Uh, and also, he wasn't anticipating that long of a stay in the hospital. You know,
Hmm.
like at most, we've heard over the weekend, maybe. So we might be doing this next Monday. Like I said, it's a bit up in the air. But anyway, the next game review session, we'll be having reviews of Soko Bond. That is Soko Bond. To be
Because
clear
it's a
here,
pun.
yes. We'll get more into it in the actual review. Um, Chronicles of Albion, the Magic Convention, Scepter Road Voyager, and Muse Dash. So look for that, and be sure to tune in about 15 minutes for a new episode of Moonhawk Studios Presents. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.